Good morning, human anomaly, David. An artificial voice spoke to him in the dark of his isolation hab. It is currently the 12th hour of the shipboard time. You have 3 hours until your quarantine is finished. It chirped while raising the light level for him to see, or maybe to keep him from going back to sleep. Yeah, he groaned. The artificial intelligence system of the ship didn't seem to understand humans yet. Thanks, Gavi. How is the rest of my team doing? He said as he stretched out his arms while standing. The rest of the human anomalies have been behaving, and their current health is in good order. However, a few have recently had a large spike in heart rate, it responds. It seemingly has not noticed its new nickname. Moreover, I have called for a medical staff member to do a full screening of yourself and the rest of the human anomalies. Each of you is showing signs of cognitive impairment. Wait, what? David thought for a second while getting dressed. Explain what you mean, he stated. Well, human anomaly, David, you and the rest of your team have begun to call for unknown entities that my sensors can't detect. This ongoing behavior had started with human anomaly Andrew and has spread throughout each of you. Slowing every one of you had begun calling out to these entities, it stated. It almost sounded like a scientist for a second. You have just called out to Gavi. Human anomaly Emma attempted to speak with a governor, and human anomaly Jackson began and has not ceased to request information from a G-Dog, though I am certain that there are no Earth creatures of Canis lupus family on board. Of course she did. David had no choice now. Gavi, do you have access to Earth's mental evaluation of humans? And if you do, please read over Part 17G, he said before going about brushing his teeth. Yes, it states that human anomalies are a socially sentient race that highly values family and friends. Their desire to bond with others is highly strong and deeply entrenched in their mental aptitude. The AI stated its monotone voice didn't add to the article, which David had to read a fair bit of. It also states that when lacking such bonding, they will attempt similar social paradigms with inanimate objects or non-sentient creatures. Yes, now take into account that aside from our short introduction to the captain, all 26 of us were shuffled into isolation habits, where our only point of interaction was you. David paused to rinse out the toothpaste for 5 Earth weeks. I do not see how this has caused you all to lose a portion of your cognitive functions, it responded. We aren't. We are all projecting our desire for social interaction on the thing we have been interacting with, you. David answered, Your designation is Jevai. I was calling you Gavi, a human male name from my region of the Earth. Jackson, may God forgive her, gave you the nickname G-Dog, and Emmy was using a slang term from her region. He reached over to his files on the team and the crew of the ship. We are perfectly fine and do not need the screening. Please cancel the request for the medical staff. One moment, your answer does fit within the parameters of the article. I shall cancel the request, the AI said. For a second, it seemed uncertain about the answer David gave, but there was no time for that. David, as a part of my function, I must file this insight with the Council's archives. However, I am obligated to ask if there is a way to avoid such things from happening. David pushed on the dossier he was reading. Well, I guess having a member of the medical staff come and speak with us on a semi-weekly basis would work. However, having a terminal to speak to each other with would also work. I see. I have added your suggestions in the notes of the event. Thank you for helping, it said, replicating a cheerful tone. David knew the event wouldn't even reach the Council, let alone the shipbuilders guild that makes the exploration ships. But it did cheer him up a bit. He still had work to do and flipped to the segment that showed a map, or more like maps of the ship. When the door finally opened, David stepped and looked over at the other 25 members of his team, stepped out of their habitats and greeted each other with quick hugs and handshakes. Everyone smiled as they gathered around David. Okay, guys, you and I both know that the food in there wasn't so good, he said with a nod of the head to his habitat for a second. So what do you say we have our first debrief in the mess hall while we eat something that isn't a nutrient block? He was expecting a simple nod of agreement, however. They all agreed in more of the joking at the quality of their meal's way. That was fine with him. Morale had to be high for their part in the expedition. Also, I have some fun news. The onboard AI believed that we were all losing our minds. Moreover, I regret to inform you all that each of you owes me a week's wages. They all exchanged looks of confusion for a brief second, before turning almost in unison to Engineer Andrew, who had for one part begun to turn a few shades of red. "Frag, all of you," Andrew snapped. "It was so boring being stuck in there with nothing to do." Okay, David said with a slight grin. It's not his fault. Unlike most of you, he hadn't served or ever been to a GC station before now. Affixing his eyes to the most embarrassing nickname given. After all, we can't all be friends with G-Dog, right, Jackson? He wasn't sure if it was fair, but they all made bets, and as the Legion officer and team leader, he would hold them all to their bets. However, before he could speak, Pilot Oscar jumped in. "Oh, great. Then it's the wee lass that buys the drinks," he said with a heartfelt chuckle. Of course, the Irelander that remembers the bet about alcohol. David chuckled to himself. "Easy, guys. We aren't making a port for a few weeks, if not months. Moreover, I am sure that the captain is eager to get on the way. So let's get something to eat and then find our rooms." He could hear the sounds of pained adults being refused a chance to drink, but he didn't care. "The sooner we eat and debrief, the faster I can go to check in with the captain. So let's go." That finally got them going. As they walked, David could hear each of them giving Andrew some advice on how to hold out longer. They had made it to the mess hall, more accurately to the omnivore mess hall, and quickly pushed some tables together, once everyone was seated and eating. David had a quick meal and got up to talk to them while they finished. "Okay, Andrew, Emmy, Cole, and Jackson. The retrofit to the housing of the new shielding unit should be done by now. Get all the tests you need to be done as fast as you can, and get it ready to power up too." The four of them gave him a thumbs up between mouthfuls of food. "Oscar, Daniela, and Rick, our shuttles will be in the hangar. Go ahead and make sure no one has messed with them." All three of them gave him a quick nod and went back to eating. "Hans, Maya, Leilani, Anastasia, and Amari, your labs should have all of your equipment and gear. If anything is missing, contact me." He turned to the rest. "As for the rest of you, your gear and equipment are stored in the armory. And you also have a practice boarding session with the Chief of Security tomorrow at 0930, so please don't go too hard in training tonight." The last members of his team exchanged looks before one of them looked over. "On that note, where is the gym?" "I'll show you later after I meet with the captain," David deflected, though mainly because he hadn't looked for it on his map yet. "Any other questions?" he said, trying to move the topic on. However, after a few seconds of everyone focusing on eating something that didn't have a texture like rubber and didn't taste like moldy cheese, he understood. "Okay, good. Unless you need me, I'll see you all at 0700 tomorrow at breakfast." They all stared daggers at him for a time, but no one said a thing as he walked away. Shortly after leaving the mess hall on his way to the bridge, he was approached by a Lethrani. He saw them long before they had started to move, but he knew that some races still didn't like being approached by his one kind, so he kept walking. If David had to describe them, the Lethrani looked a bit like a scaly rabbit, but he would never say as much out loud. Their kind evolved on a cradle world, and one with few predators. Just about chest height on most humans, they had a hopping-like way of walking. They have a slim frame with just enough muscle structure to move, large rabbit-like eyes, and nose resting on a light muscle that gave way to two buck teeth. They are only visible because of their lips, which makes it look like they are always smiling. But their ears are the best way to gauge their emotional state, be it folded back with fear, upright at alert, or bent slightly with comfort. As they walked closer to him, David started recalling everything he could remember about their race. And from what he did remember, this one appeared to be a female of their kind. Her brighter colors and more angular scales are an evolutionary quirk of their homeworld, an attempt to seem poisonous to their only natural predators. She had a pattern of blues and yellows that shifted as her nose twitched. "Excuse, Miss Henri, but are you the Legion officer of the human anomalies on board?" the Lithran asked once she was in earshot. Her voice sounded like a melody. "Yes, I am David Solomon. It is a pleasure to meet and hear you," David said, and moved his head from left to right. It was the way humans could mimic the Lithran's greeting gesture. She stared at him for a second, before a bright smile ran across her face. "It is a pleasure to meet and hear you too, Dodd." She stopped and looked back at him. "I apologize. Your name is hard for me. Can you say it again?" It is pronounced David, but my friends call me Dav, he replied as he watched her work her way around his name. Is there something I can help you with? Having him speak snapped her attention back to him. Oh, yes, the communications officer asks that Miss Henri bring this to you, she said as she held up a large wrist device. Also, that you should have your colony come and get theirs from the supply office. Colony? David muttered, confused for a moment before realizing what she meant. Oh, my team, yes. I'll let them know as soon as I can. He nodded and tiled a bit at the hip. Thank Miss Henri for the speed and grace of this message. Oh, yes. She was stunned for a second. You are welcome, and please take care until our next passing, she said before walking away. David watched her for a minute as she continued down the hall and away from the bridge. Before turning his attention to the device, it was a standard item on GC ships. With an inbuilt communication array, a holo map of the ship with a guide marker, and could also communicate with the ship's AI. That, however, was the issue. The AI would tell the captain everything, and he and his team needed privacy. The bridge of this vessel was made with the understanding of nearly all Larashi crew, so looks a bit like a bowl with a few raised platforms closer to the middle. The captain was seated on the highest platform that had 2 stairways up the spiral around its support, mostly there for the races in the community that didn't have the gift of flight. The captain was an older Larashi, his once proud and bold colors fading to subtle grays and white that gave him an air of regality befitting his post. His beak was still hooked down slightly, and a part had been replaced by a gold-plated alloy of some kind. To David, the captain's race always reminded him of dodos of Earth's ancient past, albeit more evolved. Captain Clutho, Legion Officer David Solomon reporting in, he said as he came to attention next to the captain. The old bird looked over and his eyes widened a bit. At ease, David, the captain said. This vessel is not a military one. Yes, Captain. David, I have a question. The Givai says you would be able to answer, the captain said in a tone that gave David the idea that a prank had been pulled. Of course, sir. The AI has asked that I give him a moniker, a nickname as humans say. The captain watched David closely. Can you please explain to me why? David was stumped for one too many seconds before he forced his attention back. Yes, Captain, you see, I and the onboard AI had a misunderstanding this morning, in which I had called the Gavi, a name from my home region on Earth. David tried in vain to clear his throat. I believe it may have taken the idea of being given an easier name as a good one. I see, the captain mused over the information before letting out a few squawks, analogous to laughter. I think I shall use the name you gave it, David, he said as he drew new air into his lunges. Gevai, I like the nickname Gavi. Do know that in my native tongue it means annoying. Captain, as per your request, I shall now acknowledge the name Gavi as an address to myself, the AI said from the captain's commanding chair to the squawking of the captain, who was joined by other Larishi officers in earshot. After a minute of laughter, the captain turned his attention back to David. So, seeing you on the command deck, you must have completed isolation. He eyed, and your clutch is settling in? Yes, Captain, I have also debriefed them as they were eating. Moreover, David started before being cut off. Human Legion Officer, you are needed in the Medi-Center, Gavi said in a disruptive and loud tone. David blanked out for a moment. Moreover, I had asked my team to get to work, and now I believe one, if not more, did something idiotic, David said, his voice controlled and calm. Forgive me, Captain, I'll see to that ever-foolishness my team had caused, and will handle it as best I can. He snapped back to attention, only breaking with a wave of the captain's arm. As David briskly walked to the Medi-Center, one thought crossed his mind. Good thing whoever it is are in the Medi-Center, because I am about to give them cognitive issues.